That night isn't over. It still lives in me, not as an open wound, but as one of those foundation lines architects mark on the ground before erecting a building, the line that defines everything that comes after. We were at a friend's house, the kind of casual gathering that used to be my favorite. Laughter, soft music, the smell of food in the air. I felt a little uncomfortable in my outfit, a choice that seemed safe in front of the mirror at home, but under the lights of someone else's living room, it suddenly felt tight, restrictive. I was moving with that caution you adopt when you don't want to draw attention to your body, Pulling my shirt down, sitting in a way that my belly wouldn't fold over my pants, little adjustments that are a full-time job. And then it happened. The host, a good friend of ours, offered dessert, a chocolate cake that looked divine. I declined with that polite smile that says, "Oh, I'd love to, but I shouldn't." He insisted lightly, as good friends do. "Just a little piece, you deserve it." And that's when my husband across the room blurted it out. He didn't yell. He didn't even raise his voice. He said it jokingly so everyone could hear. "Honey, leave her alone. Can't you see she's already our before picture for our weight loss photo?" The laughter that followed wasn't general. It was worse. It was the awkward laughter of some people, the heavy silence of others. The air became thick, still. I felt my face burn, a heat rising from my chest to my ears. I wanted the ground to open up and swallow me. I wanted to disappear. I looked at him, waiting for a sign that it was a terrible joke, a slip of the tongue. But he was smiling, as if he had just made the smartest joke in the world, seeking the approval of his friends. At that moment, I was no longer his wife. I was the butt of the joke, the living proof of a failure. The worst night of my life was actually the day my real life began. If you've ever felt invisible in your own body, if you've ever felt that the person you see in the mirror is a stranger who has taken control, I invite you to stay with me and listen to this story until the end. Subscribe to this channel because what I discovered in the months following that humiliation is not just about losing weight. It's about rebuilding yourself. The truth is, that night was just the end of a chapter I refused to read for a long time. The problem didn't start there. It started quietly, years earlier, so gradually that I didn't even notice. It started with the first pair of jeans that were a little too tight, and I blamed the dryer. It started with the constant fatigue that I attributed to my busy life, work, home. It's normal to be tired, I told myself. Every woman my age feels this way. It was a comfortable lie. It was the sound of the problem setting in, like a slow, silent leak in the walls of a house that you only notice when the damp has taken over everything. I remember looking at old photos from 5 or 6 years ago and feeling a pang of, it wasn't even envy, it was strangeness. Who was that woman? The one with a sparkle in her eyes, who wore whatever she wanted without a second thought, who had an energy that seemed to overflow. Little by little, she disappeared. She was replaced by a slower, more cautious version. A version that preferred to stay home because going out required a huge effort. Choosing an outfit was a battle. Facing the mirror was an uncomfortable truce. Sex became a choreography of hiding my body, turning off the lights, hoping it would end soon so I could stop thinking about how I was being perceived. My body had become a prison, and I was both the jailer and the prisoner. I punished myself with cruel thoughts, repeating to myself the criticisms I thought others were thinking. And the worst part is that I thought it was all my fault. Lack of willpower, laziness, neglect. I internalized the idea that my worth was directly linked to the number on the scale, and as that number went up, my worth went down. And of course, I tried everything. Oh, how I tried. I was the queen of diets, the protein diet, where I dreamed of a piece of bread, the points diet, which turned me into an anxious walking calculator, intermittent fasting, which left me with headaches and a terrible mood. Each diet began with a wave of hope, the promise that this time will be different. I would buy all the allowed foods, clean the pantry of forbidden foods, and announce to everyone that I was now focused. And for a week, maybe 2, it worked. The scales showed a pound or 2 less, and I felt euphoric. But it was an illusion. It was like trying to hold back the ocean with a bucket. The hunger returned, not physical hunger, but a desperate emotional hunger. The urge to eat was not a desire, it was a compulsion, a need to fill a void that was not in my stomach. And with each failure, each time I went off the diet, the guilt came crashing down. And with it, the weight returned. And it always brought a little more back with it, like a tourist returning from a trip with excess baggage. I tried gyms too. I paid expensive fees at trendy places. I bought new workout clothes, hoping they would motivate me. I felt out of place, as if everyone there knew a secret I didn't. I ran on the treadmill, watching the time pass, each minute dragging on like an hour. I lifted weights feeling weak and clumsy. And the result? Almost none. A little more pain in my body, a little more frustration. I was doing everything they told me to do. Eat less, exercise more. And yet, my body seemed to fight me every step of the way, resisting, stubbornly refusing to change. It was a war of attrition, and I was losing. The humiliation that night was the trigger, but the powder had been dry and accumulating for years, in every failed diet, in every piece of clothing that no longer fit, in every look of disappointment I saw in the mirror. And that night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling while my husband slept peacefully beside me, I made a decision. I was no longer going to fight this war with the wrong weapons. I was no longer going to try to be a good soldier in a battle that was lost from the start. I was going to change the battlefield. I was going to find out who the real enemy was. That sleepless night was not filled with tears of self-pity. It was filled with a cold, clear fury, a fury that was not against my husband, not anymore. He was just the ignorant messenger of a much bigger problem. My anger was against the system, against the narrative they sold us. The idea that our bodies are a simple mathematical equation of calories in and calories out. A lie, a cruel lie that puts us, women, in a perpetual cycle of guilt and failure. With the first ray of sunshine, I didn't start a new diet. I started an investigation. I became a detective of my own body, of my own life. My first target was what I call the big noise out there, the external villain. It's the cacophony of misinformation that surrounds us. It's the multi-billion-dollar weight loss industry that profits from our insecurity, selling us quick fixes that are designed to fail, so we always come back to buy the next magic pill, the next miracle tea. It's the food industry that fills our supermarket shelves with processed products loaded with hidden sugars, preservatives, and chemicals that our bodies don't even recognize as food. They hijack our taste buds, create addiction, and make us sick, all while stamping light, diet, and healthy on their labels. And then there's social pressure, the constant bombardment of images of perfect and unattainable bodies on social media, in magazines, on television. Pressure that makes us believe that our happiness and worth are contingent on a specific type of beauty. But my research led me to an even darker place, a villain I didn't expect, something scientists call endocrine disruptors. These are invisible chemicals that are in everything, in the plastics of our water bottles and food containers, in the pesticides on our vegetables, in the cosmetics we put on our skin. These treacherous molecules mimic our own hormones and wreak silent havoc on our system. They tell our bodies to store fat, especially in the belly area. They mess with our thyroid, our metabolism, our fertility. We are being chemically bombarded every day, and no one warns us. We are fighting a hormonal battle that we cannot win just by eating salad. Discovering this was liberating. The guilt, that enormous weight I had been carrying on my shoulders, began to dissipate. It wasn't me. It wasn't my lack of willpower. I was living in an environment that was programming me to gain weight, to get sick. My home, which should have been my refuge, was full of these invisible enemies. I was fighting a ghost, but the investigation didn't stop there. If there was an external villain, I felt there had to be an accomplice on the inside. And that's when I dove into the biology of stress and discovered the second enemy, the internal villain. I named it Metabolism Under Siege. Think of your body as a medieval castle. It has a brilliant defense system designed to protect you from real threats, such as infections or physical dangers. The problem is that in our modern lives, our defense system doesn't know the difference between a tiger running toward us and a stressful email from our boss, a fight with our partner, worrying about bills, or public humiliation at a party. To our body, stress is stress. And when stress becomes chronic, as it does in most of our lives, the castle goes into a permanent state of siege. The body begins to produce cortisol, the stress hormone, at very high and constant levels. And cortisol is a tyrant. It screams at the body, "We are in crisis. Save all the energy you can. Store fat, especially in the belly, so we have reserves for emergencies." It increases the appetite for sweet and fatty foods because the brain thinks it needs quick energy to fight or flee. It causes insulin resistance, which means that sugar cannot enter the cells to be used as energy and ends up being stored as more fat. It inflames the entire body, creating a vicious cycle of pain, fatigue, and more weight gain. I realized that my body wasn't fighting against me. It was desperately trying to protect me from a threat it believed was real and constant. My metabolism wasn't slow, it was in panic mode. My fatigue wasn't laziness, it was battle exhaustion. My emotional hunger wasn't gluttony, it was a primitive brain screaming for help. And the diet? The calorie restriction? For a body under siege, a diet is interpreted as yet another threat. My God, on top of all the dangers out there, now we're running out of food. We need to slow down our metabolism even more to survive. That's why diets always fail in the long run. They work against our survival biology. They deepen the state of siege. It was such a moment of clarity that I had to sit down. I understood everything. The puzzle came together in front of me. The external villain, with its hormonal pollution and social pressure, creates chronic stress. And the internal villain, metabolism under siege, reacts to that stress by locking us into a cycle of fat storage and inflammation. I didn't need another diet. I needed a peace treaty with my own body. I needed to signal to my inner castle that the war was over. And the question that changed everything for me was, how do I do that? How do I turn off the alarm that has been ringing nonstop for years? Have you ever felt like this? Like you're in a constant war against your own body without even knowing why? Tell me your story in the comments. I want to know that I'm not alone. Identifying the enemies was the first step, but knowing who the villains are doesn't give you the map to victory. It just shows you the complexity of the war. I felt smarter, more aware, but still lost. Like I had a diagnosis, but no treatment. I knew I needed to find a way to communicate to my body that it was safe. But how do you speak the language of cells? How do you send a telegram to the endocrine system? My journey took me away from weight loss blogs and fitness magazines. I immersed myself in scientific articles, biochemistry forums, anthropological studies. I was looking for an anomaly, a group of people, a culture, a tribe, somewhere in history or the world, who lived under stress but didn't suffer the metabolic consequences we suffer. And it was in a forgotten corner of the internet, in a study on the resilience of communities living in hostile environments, that I found the first clue. The study talked about how certain plants, when subjected to extreme drought or pest attacks, produce special compounds, a kind of molecular first aid kit to protect and repair themselves. And the most fascinating thing was that when the people in that region consumed these plants, it seemed as if they borrowed this resilience. Their bodies became more efficient at dealing with physical and environmental stress. The article used a term that stuck in my mind: cell repair signals. It wasn't about vitamins or minerals. It was about information. These were molecules that carried a message, and the message was calm down, repair, rebuild. It was exactly the telegram I needed to send. I started following this thread. The theory was that our modern diet, even when it is healthy with broccoli and chicken, is poor in these signals. Our vegetables are grown in poor soil, protected by pesticides, harvested before they're ripe. They no longer have to fight to survive, so they no longer produce these molecules of resilience in abundance. We've lost access to this ancient language, this lost biological key that our ancestors had. And that key was what activated an internal mechanism that science was just beginning to understand. A mechanism that I decided to call the Cellular Phoenix Protocol. Phoenix because it's about rising from the ashes of chronic stress and inflammation. Cellular because that's where the real battle takes place. The idea behind the Cellular Phoenix Protocol is simple and profound. When the body receives the right dose of these repair signals, it finally understands that the threat has passed. Cortisol levels drop, inflammation decreases, and the body switches from emergency storage mode to maintenance and optimization mode. It starts using stored fat as an energy source, not because you're starving, but because it feels safe enough to open the coffers. It begins to repair damaged cells, which results in more energy, better skin, and deeper sleep. It's not about tricking your body or forcing it to lose weight. It's about creating the conditions for it to do the work it already knows how to do. It's about giving it permission to heal itself. All of this was fascinating, but it still seemed theoretical, distant. And then something happened that gave me chills. In an anonymous online forum about hormonal health, a woman posted her story. She didn't use any scientific terms. She didn't talk about markers or protocols, but she described my life with frightening accuracy, the fatigue that felt like a heavy blanket, the frustration with diets, the feeling of disconnection from my own body, the silent despair. It was like reading my own diary written by a stranger. And then she told how she found a small study on specific phytonutrients from plants that grew in harsh conditions, and how she began incorporating concentrated versions of these extracts into her routine. She described the change. It wasn't overnight weight loss. It was subtle at first. One morning, she woke up feeling rested. One day she realized she hadn't been thinking about food all day. The feeling that the internal noise had diminished. That post was the validation I needed. My experience was not an isolated personal failure. It was a pattern, a condition shared by women everywhere, trapped in the same biological trap. And the solution wasn't more effort, but different knowledge. Knowledge that didn't refute everything I knew, but was the missing catalyst. Now I understood why diets didn't work on their own. It was like trying to start a car with a dead battery. You can have the best fuel in the world in the tank, but without the initial spark, the engine won't start. The Cellular Phoenix Protocol was the spark. It was the discovery that made all my past efforts make sense. They weren't useless, they were just incomplete. The ignition key was missing. And now, for the first time in years, I felt like I had found not only the key, but the complete instruction manual for my own body. The question now was no longer what to do, but how to start. The theory was beautiful. The Cellular Phoenix Protocol, the lost biological key. It made perfect sense in my head, but between theory and practice, there is a chasm, and I was standing on the edge of it, afraid to jump. What if it was just another beautiful story, another hope that would end in frustration? I decided I couldn't just keep reading. I needed to test my new hypothesis. I needed proof, however small, that I was on the right track. The woman on the forum had talked about concentrated extracts, but I wasn't ready for that yet. I wanted to start with what I could control, with what I could find in nature. My research on cell repair signals led me to a list of specific foods. These weren't magic foods for weight loss. They were foods known for their anti-inflammatory and adaptogenic properties. Turmeric, ginger, high-quality green tea, certain types of mushrooms, dark leafy greens. Foods that, historically, grew in conditions that forced them to become resilient. I didn't start a diet. The word itself made me anxious. I called it the pacification phase. My goal wasn't to lose weight. My goal was to reduce inflammation and signal to my body that it was safe. I started making a potent tea with turmeric and ginger every morning. I added more bitter vegetables to my meals. I drastically reduced sugar and processed foods, not as a rule of diet, but as an act of removing aggressors from my system. I also tackled stress head-on. I couldn't eliminate the sources of stress in my life, but I could change how my body reacted to them. Research showed that just a few minutes of deep, conscious breathing each day could begin to lower cortisol levels. So every morning before getting out of bed, I spent 5 minutes just breathing in deeply, holding, exhaling slowly. It seemed silly, too simple to work. In the first few days, nothing happened. I still felt tired and bloated. The scale didn't budge. The voice of doubt in my head started screaming, "Here we go again, another waste of time." I almost gave up, but I clung to logic. I wasn't on a diet to lose 5 pounds in a week. I was trying to reverse years of metabolic siege. It would take time. I promised myself I would stick with it for 2 weeks, no matter what. And then, around the 10th day, something changed. It was so subtle that I almost didn't notice it. I woke up before my alarm, and I didn't feel like I'd been hit by a truck. There was a stillness, an absence of deep fatigue. That day at work, I had a stressful meeting. Normally, I would have left with my heart racing and a crazy urge to eat something sweet, but this time I felt centered. The stress was there, but it didn't seem to be overwhelming me anymore. It was passing through me. That night, I looked at myself in the mirror. I wasn't any thinner, but the bloating in my belly had visibly decreased. My face looked less inflamed. There was a different glow to my skin, and most important of all, the noise. The constant noise of self-criticism, hunger, and anxiety in my head was lower. It was as if someone had finally turned down the volume on a poorly tuned radio that had been playing nonstop for years. That was my proof. It wasn't a number on the scale. It was a feeling, the feeling that my body had heard my message of peace. The treaty was starting to work. The phoenix was stirring, even if only slightly, beneath the ashes. That small victory gave me the fuel to keep going. It validated all my research. It proved that the problem wasn't my body, but the environment I put it in and the information I fed it. I realized that the journey to regain my body and my health would not be a 100-meter dash, but a long, patient walk. And for the first time, I didn't feel overwhelmed by that idea. I felt empowered. I had the map. I had the compass. And now, I had the first proof that the promised land at the end of the map was real. I was finally heading in the right direction, and every step, no matter how small, brought me closer to home, closer to myself. The war was far from over, but for the first time, I felt that peace was possible. That first spark of hope, the feeling of waking up rested and less bloated, was like finding water in the desert. It gave me the strength to turn my investigation into a life project. I became the architect of my own fortress, and every small success was a brick I laid in place. The pacification phase continued, and subtle results began to accumulate. My morning energy became more consistent. My digestion, which had always been a problem, began to regulate itself. My clothes started to fit more loosely, not in a drastic way, but in a comfortable way, as if my body was finally letting go of every drop of water and every ounce of fat out of fear. Motivated by this improvement, my search for validation deepened. I was no longer a victim looking for answers. I was a researcher building a case. I returned to scientific studies, but now with a new perspective. I didn't just read the abstracts. I immersed myself in the methodologies and the data, and what I found was overwhelming. Studies published in renowned journals confirmed the role of low-grade chronic inflammation in weight gain. Research directly linked cortisol imbalance to abdominal fat accumulation, and most importantly, clinical studies that tested the same cell repair signals I had discovered. They showed how these specific compounds, extracted from resilient plants, could, in appropriate concentrations, help regulate the stress response, improve insulin sensitivity, and reduce inflammatory markers in the body. I found interviews with doctors and scientists who were at the forefront of this new way of thinking. They talked about information medicine, about how food and certain bioactive compounds are not just calories, but instructions we give our bodies. Every article, every interview, every testimonial I found was another brick in my fortress. I wasn't making anything up. I wasn't crazy. I had stumbled upon a fundamental truth about female biology that was being largely ignored by the conventional eat less, exercise more approach. My personal experience was being confirmed by science and by other women. But then, after a few months, I hit a plateau. The progress that had been steady began to slow down. I felt much better than before, no doubt, but I knew I wasn't where I could be. I still had days when I felt tired, and my weight loss, while real, had plateaued. That's when I had the epiphany that connected everything. Looking back at the studies, I noticed a crucial detail. They always mentioned the therapeutic dose. The scientists didn't give the study participants a little bit of turmeric tea. They used highly purified and concentrated extracts to ensure that the body received the exact amount of signalers needed to trigger consistent change. It clicked. I was trying to build my fortress with the right tools, but with insufficient raw materials. My approach to food was like trying to build a 10-story building using the cement I could mix in a bucket. It worked for the foundation, for the first few bricks, but to really get the structure up, I needed more. I needed the right dose, the therapeutic dose, the consistency. I understood that in order to activate the cellular Phoenix protocol fully and continuously, to really get my metabolism out of siege mode and keep it in repair and optimization mode, I would need a precision tool. I needed the purest, most concentrated form of these signaling molecules, something I could never get from food alone, no matter how perfect my diet was. This conclusion did not discourage me. On the contrary, it gave me clarity. It narratively justified the need for something more. My journey had brought me to a point where the next logical step was no longer a change in habit, but the adoption of a specific tool. It was at this point that I began to search not for a magic solution, but for a product that encapsulated the science I had spent months studying. A solution in a bottle that wasn't an empty promise, but the logical conclusion of all my research. I wasn't looking for a diet anymore. I was looking for the key I had discovered myself, now forged in the concentration and purity that science demanded. The search for the precision tool was as meticulous as my initial research. I wasn't looking for a weight loss product. I was looking for the exact formulation of the cell repair signals that the studies pointed to. I discarded dozens of products with flashy labels and lists of useless ingredients. I became an expert at reading between the lines, identifying the quality of the extraction, the purity of the compounds. Finally, I found it. A small company that didn't make much noise but was grounded in science. The label was simple, but the ingredients were exactly what I was looking for. The concentrations were the same as those used in the clinical studies I had read. It was my hypothesis, encapsulated. I bought a bottle with a mixture of skepticism and vibrant hope. I continued with my peace diet and my morning breathing exercises. I didn't change anything else. I just added those capsules to my routine. The first 2 weeks were similar to before. I felt the continued well-being that I had been building. But in the third week, the magic happened. The change was seismic. It was as if the first few months had been the groundwork and the lighting of a small fire, and the capsule was the gasoline that turned the fire into a powerful and stable flame. The energy I felt was no longer just not being tired. It was a pulsing vitality, a mental clarity I hadn't felt since my teens. Ideas flowed, work got done. My patience with my son seemed endless, and my body, it responded in a way I didn't think was possible anymore. The stubborn fat on my belly and hips began to melt away, not in an unhealthy way, but as if my body was finally getting rid of a weight it no longer needed to carry. My curves began to reappear, my waist slimmed down. And then one day, the catalytic turning point happened. I was looking for a pair of pants in the back of my closet and found a pair of jeans, my favorite jeans from years ago, which I had kept as a relic from a past life. On impulse, I decided to try them on. I put them on, expecting that familiar resistance at the hips, but they slid right on. They went up effortlessly. I zipped them up and buttoned them, and they fit perfectly. I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't cry. I smiled, a big, genuine smile, like someone who has found an old friend. I wasn't the woman in the old photo. I was a new woman inhabiting a body that was mine again, a fortress I had built myself. And it was at that moment, at that exact moment, when I felt hope becoming reality, theory becoming fabric and form in my own body, that I knew I needed to stop and speak directly to you. If my story resonated with you, if you saw yourself in the exhaustion, the frustration, the silent war against your body, I want you to know that it's not your fault. For years, your body has been operating like a powerful and incredible engine, but it has been forced to run with the handbrake on. Stress, hormonal pollution, misinformation, all of this has kept the brakes on, causing you to expend enormous energy to move forward just a few inches. What I discovered, and what this capsule represents, is not a new engine. It is the key that finally releases the handbrake. It adds nothing strange or artificial to your system. It simply sends the safety signal that allows your own metabolism, your own engine, to return to its natural full function. The urgency I feel in sharing this with you does not come from fear of what might happen if you do nothing. It comes from the excitement of knowing the incredible potential that is there, blocked, waiting to be unleashed. Every day you spend with the handbrake on is a day less of vitality, clarity, and joy that you could be experiencing. That's why I did the curation work for you. I spent months immersed in science, separating what works from what is just marketing. I know that not all products are created equal. The purity and concentration of the signals are everything. The link I left for you here in the description and in the pinned comment is for the exact formula I used. It's the only one I trust, the only one I know contains the key in its most precise form. If you're ready to let go of the handbrake and feel your true potential, this is your next logical and safe step. Subscribe to this channel to continue receiving empowering information. And now, let's get back to the story, because the best part is yet to come. 7 months have passed since the night of humiliation. 7 months of silent and focused rebuilding. My transformation wasn't just physical. Yes, I had lost the weight that had haunted me for years, but the most profound change was internal. I walked differently. I talked differently. I occupied my space in the world with a confidence that didn't come from the approval of others, but from a deep knowledge and respect for my own body and my own journey. And then the phone rang. It was him, my ex-husband. His voice was hesitant. He said he missed me, that he had made a terrible mistake. He talked about how I looked, happy, radiant. He saw the photos my friends had posted. He wanted to try again. He begged me to take him back. I listened to him in silence, without anger, without bitterness. When he finished, I took a deep breath and felt the solidity of my inner fortress. I appreciate your call, I said, my voice calm and clear. But the woman you're begging for, she doesn't exist anymore. I built her on the ruins of the woman you humiliated, and in this new home, there's no room for you. Hanging up that phone was not an act of revenge, it was an act of graduation. The final validation that my happiness, my worth, was never in his hands. It was always in mine, waiting for me to have the courage and knowledge to claim it. My final scene, my reward, is not about him. It's about me. It's a Saturday afternoon, a few weeks after that phone call. I'm at a park with my son. The sun is warm and we're running on the grass. I pick him up and spin him around in the air, and my laughter is loud and free. There's no twinge in my back, no shortness of breath. There is only strength, energy, and a joy so pure that it overflows. Later, sitting on a bench, watching him play, I catch my reflection in a small pond, and I see the woman who is there, strong, healthy, with a sparkle in her eyes that isn't just happiness, it's wisdom, it's peace. I was finally home, in the only place that matters, inside myself. If this journey resonates with you, if you're ready to start rebuilding yourself, sign up, share this video with a woman who needs to hear this message, and don't forget to click on the link in the description and pinned comment to see the exact tool that helped me build my fortress. Your journey starts now.